For my 72nd birthday, my wife brought me a surprise. Not a watch, not a cake, not even a new fishing rod. She brought the family she'd kept hidden from me for 25 years and sat them around my table like they owned the place. They smiled, called me John, and started talking about my house, my savings, my future. By the time they finished explaining what they expected from their new patriarch, I'd already decided on the gift I was going to give my wife in return. What would you do if you were me? Before I tell you what I did, I want your honest opinion. Read this to the end and then tell me. Did I go too far or not nearly far enough? My name is John Dortman. I'm 72 years old, a retired structural engineer, and a grandfather of 4. I lost my first wife, Janet, to cancer when I was 48. 15 years later, I married Linda, a charming red-haired woman who told me she had no family left and that all she wanted was a quiet life with a good man. For 25 years, I believed her. I believed her when she said her parents were gone. I believed her when she said she'd never been married. I believed her when she said she'd never had children. Looking back, that blind trust is the part that angers me the most. Not because I was naive, but because I chose to be. I'd already been burned once when my own son chose his wife's family traditions over me at Christmas, telling me I wouldn't be welcome this year because I didn't fit their idea of sophistication. I told myself I wouldn't let bitterness grow in me. I told myself that with Linda I'd start again. For a long time it looked like I'd been right. We met at a church potluck when I was 58. She wore a navy dress and brought a casserole nobody actually liked, but she laughed at herself when nobody touched it, and I liked that about her. How easy she seemed with embarrassment, how quickly she redirected the conversation to someone else. We dated, we married, we built a quiet life in a modest 2-story house on a tree-lined street in Ohio. My daughter Stephanie and my son Mark accepted her, mostly because I looked happier than I had in years. My grandkids called her Grandma Linda, and she seemed to love them in her own slightly distant way. The only strange thing at first was how Linda talked about her past. Or rather, how she didn't. Whenever I asked about her childhood, she'd wave a hand. "Oh, John, you don't want to hear about that mess," she'd say, laughing, then kissing my cheek. "You're my family now. That's all that matters." When I asked if she ever missed her parents, she'd grow quiet and say they hadn't been kind, that cutting them out of her life had been the best decision I ever made. When I asked if she'd ever wanted children, she'd say she was never the mother type and change the subject. I learned not to push. You do that when you're older. You trade curiosity for peace. The first crack in the story came 3 years ago. It was a Tuesday in March, one of those gray days where winter refuses to leave. I was going through the mail when I saw a thick envelope addressed to Linda in a name I'd never seen before. Linda Jefferson, it said. Not Dortman. I turned it over in my hands, frowning. It was from a hospital in another state. When I asked Linda about it that evening, she went very still, then snatched the envelope from my fingers. "It's old insurance stuff," she said too quickly. "From before we married. I'll handle it." She shoved it into her purse. I watched her do it. A little knot forming in my chest, the kind a man like me doesn't admit to. A month later, I noticed a bank withdrawal on our joint account for $5,000. Cashier's check. "Told you the roof needed more work than we thought," she said when I asked. "Don't you remember? You nodded when the contractor explained it." Maybe I had. My memory isn't perfect these days. But I could still read a bank statement, and I hadn't written any check to a contractor. The second crack came from the one person in our family who still talked without filters, my 11-year-old granddaughter, Lily. It was a Saturday afternoon about 6 months before my 72nd birthday. Lily was in the den drawing while Linda talked on the phone in the kitchen. I was upstairs sorting through boxes of old photographs when I heard a floorboard creak. "Grandpa," Lily whispered from the doorway, eyes wide. "Can you come down? Grandma's being weird." We crept halfway down the stairs, stopping where we could see the reflection of the kitchen in the hallway mirror. Linda stood with her back to us, phone pressed hard to her ear. "Yes, I know what I said," she hissed quietly. "But he still thinks you're gone, Carl. Do you understand what that means? He trusts me. When he signs the papers, the house is practically yours. You and the kids just need to be patient." Kids. The word hit me like a physical blow. There was a pause. I could hear a muffled male voice on the other end. "No, he has no idea," Linda said. "John believes every word I say. He's too soft-hearted to question me. That's why this will work. Have Damon and Cheryl ready when I call. We'll do it on his birthday. With everyone there, he'll be too embarrassed to refuse." Lily's hand went into mine, small and shaking. "Grandpa," she whispered, "who are Damon and Cheryl?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the rest of Linda's conversation. I waited until she hung up, walked back into the den, and acted like I'd just come down for a glass of water. Years of business meetings had taught me how to wear a mask, how to smile while someone slowly slid a knife between your ribs. That night, after Linda fell asleep, I went out to the car, locked the doors, and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to shake. When the shaking stopped, I turned the key in the ignition, turned on the dome light, and pulled out a notebook. If Linda was going to treat me like a gullible old fool, I decided, it was time to show her exactly what a gullible old fool could do when cornered. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was Aaron Bishop, a calm-eyed man in his 40s with a tidy office and a habit of listening more than he spoke. I handed him the bank statements, told him about the strange mail, about Linda's slip on the phone, careful to say I'd accidentally overheard, not that I'd been hiding on the stairs like some spy in my own home. "Mr. Dortman," he said after I finished, steepling his fingers, "I need to ask a blunt question. Do you want to salvage this marriage, or do you want to protect yourself?" I thought about the nights Linda and I had spent watching television together, about her hand on my arm in church, about the times she'd stayed with me in the hospital when I'd had my mild heart attack 2 years prior. Then I thought about the word kids, and the name Carl. "I want to protect my family," I said quietly, "my children, my grandchildren, and, if there's anything left of it, my dignity." He nodded once. "Then we need information, and we need to move before she does." The following weeks were a quiet, controlled storm. Aaron hired a private investigator. The investigator found things I had never imagined. Linda, it turned out, had been married before. That husband's name was Carl Jefferson. The marriage license was 28 years old. The divorce decree? There wasn't one. Linda was still legally Mrs. Jefferson. She had 2 children with him, Damon, now 45, and Cheryl, 43. She'd told me she'd never been a mother. In reality, she'd simply chosen not to be one in my presence. There were bank transfers from our joint account to an out-of-state account held under the name Jefferson Family Trust. Years' worth. Tens of thousands of dollars. Hospital bills for Carl's treatments. Legal fees for Damon's bankruptcy. Tuition payments for Cheryl's kids, all from money I'd earned thinking I was paying for vacations, home repairs, and charitable donations. But the worst was a set of emails the investigator managed to obtain. They were between Linda and Damon. In one, Damon wrote, "Once you get him to sign power of attorney, Mom, we can put him in assisted living before he gets any crazier. The doctors will back you up if you say he's forgetful. Sell the house, split it with Carl, and you're done. This is your chance to finally make up for what he put us through when you left." Linda's response had been short. "I know what I'm doing. Stop rushing me. We're doing it on his birthday. He's sentimental. He won't want to cause a scene." I read those words in Aaron's office, the paper trembling in my hands, the letters blurring at the edges. "Can she do this?" I asked, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. "Not if we get ahead of her," he said. "Right now, your house is in both your names, joint tenancy. Your accounts are joint. Your will leaves everything to her and then to your children. Legally, she has pathways, but she also committed fraud. She misrepresented her marital status when she married you. She's been siphoning money without your informed consent. If we move carefully, we can lock down what's yours and build a record of what she's done. How long do we have? Until your birthday, at least, he said. That's when she thinks she'll spring this on you. That gives us 6 months. 6 months. 6 months to dismantle a life I'd spent 25 years building. 6 months to set up a different future for the people who actually loved me. 6 months to plan one hell of a birthday gift. We started quietly. I opened a new account in my name only and moved most of my savings there. The pension and Social Security deposits were redirected. I left just enough in the joint account to cover regular bills so Linda wouldn't notice a drastic change. We changed the deed to the house, moving it into a revocable living trust with me as trustee and my children as beneficiaries. Linda was removed as a contingent heir. We updated my will. I left Linda a modest lump sum, enough to help her if she apologized and tried to rebuild honestly, but nowhere near the house or the rest of my estate. The bulk went to Stephanie and Mark, with specific funds set aside for each grandchild's education. Aaron documented everything. Every withdrawal Linda made, every unexplained charge, every bill that led back to the Jefferson family. The private investigator gathered more. Photos of Linda visiting Carl in another state, of her hugging a man I'd never seen before, of her holding a little boy whose curly hair looked exactly like hers. My evenings turned into a strange double life. At home, I sat next to Linda on the couch, watched game shows, listened to her complain about the price of groceries and the neighbor's barking dog. She rubbed my shoulders when my back hurt, asked about my naps, reminded me to take my pills. In my mind, I replayed the emails. Put him in assisted living. Sell the house. Split it with Carl. Sometimes I caught her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite place. A mix of calculation and impatience, as if she were waiting for something to ripen. In bed at night, I listened to her breathe and wondered how many parts of our life had been real. It is a strange thing, realizing that the woman who brings you tea and tucks a blanket over your legs is also planning to send you to a nursing home the moment the ink dries on a legal document. I'd seen something similar once before, in another house, in another conversation. My daughter, years ago, had forgotten to hang up the phone, and I'd heard her and her husband calmly discuss selling my house and putting me away, treating my life as just numbers on a page. That time, I'd acted too late. This time, I wouldn't. The closer my birthday came, the more obvious Linda's nervousness became. She insisted on planning the party herself. 72 is a big one, she said, hands fluttering. We should have everyone here. The kids, the grandkids, my old friends. Old friends? I repeated. She hesitated for just a heartbeat. You've always wanted me to reconnect with my past, remember? She said. I thought maybe I'd invite a few people. It's time you met them. My heart beat once, hard. Sounds nice, I said. The more the merrier. I called Aaron that afternoon. It's time, I told him. Let's assume the party is when she makes her move. Then that's when we'll make ours, he said. We spent the last week going over every detail. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up at 6, long before Linda. I dressed in my best suit. I ate breakfast alone at the kitchen table, looking around the house I'd bought, painted, repaired, warmed with my own hands. By 9, Aaron arrived with a stack of envelopes and a woman from his office to act as a notary. They set up quietly in my home office while Linda busied herself downstairs, humming as she strung up decorations and shouted instructions at Mark about where to put the folding chairs. At 11, a police detective I'd met with 2 weeks earlier parked down the street, as planned. He sat in his car, engine off, waiting for a text from me. By noon, the house was full of the sounds of family. My grandkids arguing over board games, Stephanie fussing with a tray of deviled eggs, Mark testing the new speakers he'd convinced me to buy for the party. Linda flitted between rooms, kissing cheeks, laughing too loudly, checking her phone every few minutes. At 2 o'clock, she called everyone into the living room. "John," she sang out, "sit in your chair. It's time for your birthday surprise." I lowered myself into my recliner, the one my first wife had picked out 30 years ago. Everyone gathered in a loose semicircle. My children, my grandchildren, Aaron standing quietly in the back, pretending to be a friend from church, the notary near the doorway. Linda stood at the center, hands clasped dramatically. "For 25 years, she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound emotional. "This man has been my rock. He took me in when I had no one. He gave me a home, a life, a family." She glanced at my kids, smiling. "But there's something I haven't shared with you all," she continued. "Something from my past. A part of my heart I've kept hidden because I was ashamed and afraid. But I don't want to live in fear anymore. Not with such a generous man as my husband." She turned to the front door. "Come in," she called. The door opened. A tall man with thinning gray hair and a cheap suit stepped in first. His face was lined, his eyes sharp in that way you see in chronic gamblers and lifelong manipulators. Beside him walked a heavy-set man in his 40s with a shaved head and a tattoo peeking above his collar. Behind them, a woman in her early 40s with over-processed blonde hair clutched a designer handbag and scanned the room like she was judging a thrift store. They came in like a wave, bringing with them a smell of stale smoke and counterfeit cologne. Linda clasped the tall man's arm. "John," she said, turning back to me, "this is my ex-husband, Carl. And these are my children, Damon and Cheryl, my family." The room went silent. I heard Stephanie's soft intake of breath. Mark's muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Linda pushed on. "I was terrified to tell you," she said, eyes glistening. "You're such a traditional man, John. I thought you wouldn't understand that I left a bad situation behind. But Carl has changed. And Damon and Cheryl, well, they've had hard lives because of my choices. I think it's time we make things right, together, as one family." Damon stepped forward, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice place you've got here," he said, looking around openly. "Heard a lot about you, John." "Mostly that you're generous," Cheryl added, her tone half joking, half testing. "Mom always said you took care of people." Linda reached into her pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "And that's why," she said, voice soft, "we thought we'd use today, your special day, to make everything official." She held up the envelope like it contained front-row tickets to salvation. "Carl's health isn't great," she continued. "Damon's business fell apart. Cheryl is raising her kids alone. They need stability. We all do. I found a way to protect all of us, to bring both parts of my life together. It's just a few papers, updating your power of attorney, changing the beneficiary on the house. Nothing you wouldn't have agreed to anyway, if I'd had the courage to ask sooner." She walked toward me, the envelope in her hands. "Sign them now," she whispered, holding it out, "in front of everyone, and we can all start healing." I looked at the envelope, then at Linda, then at the faces around the room. My granddaughter Lily's eyes were huge and wet. Stephanie's lips were pressed into a thin line. Mark looked like he wanted to put his fist through a wall. Carl stood near the doorway, watching with an expression that said this was all a foregone conclusion. Damon's jaw worked, impatient. Cheryl tapped one lacquered nail against her purse. I took the envelope. My hands shook. Not because I was nervous, because I'd been holding back for 6 months. You might think this would be the moment I exploded, that I would shout, curse, throw the envelope in Linda's face. Instead, I smiled. "Linda," I said softly, "you're right about one thing." Her shoulders sagged in relief. "You should have trusted me sooner," I continued, "because I also have a surprise today." I set the envelope carefully on the coffee table. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a smaller envelope, cream-colored, thick, sealed with the neatness of a legal office. On the front, in Arian's tidy handwriting, were the words, "To Linda, your gift." I held it out to her. "Happy birthday to me," I said quietly, "and happy ending to you." Her smile faltered. What is this?" she asked. "Open it," I said. "You went to the trouble of bringing your family into my home. It's only fair that I bring mine into the truth." She hesitated. Damon snatched the envelope from my hand and tore it open. 3 things fell out onto the coffee table. A copy of our marriage certificate with the box for previously married marked "No" in her handwriting, a copy of her original marriage certificate to Carl, and a draft complaint for divorce on the grounds of fraud and bigamy already filled out with her name and mine. The room erupted. "What the hell is this?" Damon snapped. Carl went pale. Cheryl looked from the documents to Linda, then back again. "What is this, Mom?" she demanded. I raised my voice a little, enough to cut through the noise. "It's the truth," I said. "You see, Linda, you never divorced Carl, which means you were never legally my wife, which also means every document you signed as my spouse is questionable, and every dollar you siphoned from our accounts to your Jefferson Family Trust is well documented." Aaron stepped forward then, laying another stack of folders on the coffee table. "Bank statements," he said calmly. "Emails, photos, a paper trail that would make any judge's job very easy." Linda staggered back a step. "John," she said, her voice thin, "I can explain." "No," I cut in. "You've done enough explaining. You explained away the letters, the money, the phone calls. You explained away your past. Now I'm going to explain something to you." I turned to my children. "Stephanie, Mark, 6 months ago I found out Linda had another family, that she intended to use the law to put me away and sell this house out from under us. I met with Aaron here. We changed the deed. We changed my will. We moved the money. We prepared for today." Linda's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "I wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding," I continued, "that the woman who made me soup when I was sick, who held my hand in church, couldn't be the same woman plotting to ship me off to a nursing home and split my life's work with the man at our doorway." I looked at Carl. "You should know," I said to him, "that your name and social security number have already been given to the authorities in connection with fraud involving interstate transfers. You and your son Damon here have been living off money you had no right to. I don't know what your lawyer will say, but mine thinks the state will have some questions." Damon laughed, but it was forced. "You think anyone's going to believe some senile old man over us?" he said. That was when I took out my phone and tapped the screen. I'd queued it up earlier, a recording of Linda's phone call with Damon, the one the investigator had captured from her emails. Her voice filled the room, clear and unambiguous. "Once you get him to sign power of attorney, Mom, we can put him in assisted living before he gets any crazier. Sell the house, split it with Carl, and you're done." Then Linda's voice. "We're doing it on his birthday. He's sentimental. He won't want to cause a scene." Silence. Even the grandchildren stared, shocked into stillness. Linda lunged for the phone, but Aaron got there first, slipping it into his pocket. "Mrs. Jefferson, or Dortmund, depending on which lie you prefer today," he said evenly. "For your information, this and the supporting documents have already been filed with the court. Mr. Dortmund's assets are protected. The trust is in effect. Any attempt to move him without his consent would now be viewed through the lens of elder exploitation and fraud. I'd advise you to sit down." Linda swayed, then dropped onto the sofa, her hands shaking. "You can't do this," she whispered. "John, you can't do this to me, to us. We're your family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw finally what I'd refused to see for 25 years. She'd never wanted a partner. She'd wanted a provider. "You had a family," I said quietly. "You just chose to hide them until you thought you could use me to fix what you broke. You lied to me, Linda, for 25 years. You took my money. You plotted behind my back. And you planned to throw me away like I was some old piece of furniture once I'd served my purpose. I stood, my knees protesting but holding. My family, I said, looking at Stephanie and Mark, is right there. I reached into my jacket one last time and pulled out 2 slim envelopes, handing one to each of my children. In there, I said, are copies of the trust documents. When I die, this house will go to both of you jointly. There are provisions for the grandkids' education. The savings are protected. No one in this room, aside from you and your children, has any claim to what I've built. Not Linda, not Carl, not Damon or Cheryl. Cheryl's face contorted. This is unbelievable, she snapped. You stole our chance to be taken care of after everything Mom went through. No, I said calmly. Your mother stole my chance to spend my last years in peace. I'm just returning what's mine and making sure my grandchildren aren't paying for someone else's sins. Damon took a step toward me, fists clenched. You're going to regret this, old man, he spat. I glanced toward the window and sent a quick text with one hand. Seconds later, the front door opened again. The detective walked in, badge visible on his belt. Afternoon, Mr. Dortman, he said politely. You summoned me? Yes, I said. Detective Ross, this is Carl Jefferson and his son Damon. I believe you wanted to speak with them about some interesting financial patterns tied to my accounts. Carl blanched. Damon's bravado evaporated in an instant. This is harassment, Linda hissed. John, call this off, please. For God's sake, the grandchildren are watching. I looked at Lily, at Tommy, at the younger 2 who didn't quite understand but knew enough to be scared. You're right, I said. They are. And I want them to see that there are consequences when you treat people like disposable objects. The detective didn't arrest anyone on the spot. He wasn't there for theatrics. He simply handed Carl his card, talked about some serious questions they needed to answer downtown, and made it very clear that leaving the state would be a bad idea. Carl mumbled something and backed toward the door. Damon followed, shooting me a look that was equal parts hatred and fear. Cheryl grabbed her purse and stalked out after them. That left Linda. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. John, she whispered, you can't just throw away 25 years like this. I felt something break in my chest. Not my heart exactly, but the last fragile piece of hope I'd been holding for her. You did that yourself, I said. I'm just taking out the trash. I walked to the hall closet, pulled out the suitcase I'd packed the night before, and set it beside her. There are some clothes in there, I said. Enough for a few days. I've arranged for Aaron's office to communicate with you about the divorce and whatever settlement the court decides you deserve. You will not be living here while that happens. This is my house, my family's house. You are no longer welcome. Her eyes flashed with rage. You think you can just kick me out? She hissed. I've given you the best years of my life. I almost laughed. The best years of your life, I said, were spent on the phone with Carl, planning how to gut mine like a fish. You didn't come here today to celebrate me. You came to cash me in. Consider this my gift to you, Linda. What gift? She demanded. Freedom, I said. You're free to go back to the family you chose to keep instead of me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Stephanie stepped forward. Dad, she said softly, do you want us to stay? I looked at Linda, then at my children. I'd like you to stay, I said, but she needs to leave. Mark walked over, picked up the suitcase, and set it firmly at Linda's feet. Mom, he began, then stopped himself. Linda, I think you should go now. She looked at him like he'd slapped her, then at Stephanie, then at the grandchildren, all of them watching her with a mixture of confusion and hurt. Finally, she grabbed the suitcase handle, squared her shoulders, and walked out the door without another word. The detective followed at a distance, just in case. The door shut with a quiet click that felt louder than any slammed door I'd ever heard. For a moment, the house was utterly still. Then my youngest grandson, 8-year-old Henry, piped up from the couch. "Grandpa?" he asked. "Does this mean the party is over?" I looked at him, at the balloons still twisted on the banister, the half-eaten dip on the coffee table, the unopened cake in the kitchen. "No," I said, feeling something loosen in my chest. "I think the real party can finally start." We didn't do anything grand. We sang Happy Birthday, a little shakily at first. The grandkids insisted on lighting the candles twice because Lily dropped one. Stephanie cut the cake. Mark poured coffee. Aaron stayed for a slice, then left with the notary, promising to call the next day with updates. Later, when the dishes were washed and the kids were playing in the yard, Stephanie joined me on the back porch. "You knew for 6 months?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "And you waited until today to do all this?" I nodded. "It had to be today," I said. "She chose this day to try to take everything from me. I wanted this day to be the one she remembers as the moment she lost what she thought she already owned." Stephanie laid her head on my shoulder like she used to do when she was small. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, "for not seeing it, for not asking more questions, for letting you handle it alone." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet, I sat alone in my recliner and let the weight of it all settle on me. 25 years with a woman who'd been two people, a birthday party that had turned into a courtroom, a gift I'd given that felt less like revenge and more like stitching a wound closed before it bled me dry. In the weeks that followed, there were more meetings, more paperwork. Linda tried, of course. She sent messages, left voicemails full of tears and accusations, claimed I'd misunderstood everything, that she'd only wanted to secure a future for everyone. The detective kept me updated. Carl and Damon had some long conversations with the authorities. There were fines, restitution agreements, a lot of ugly letters back and forth. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. It was enough to know that for once, their schemes had consequences beyond my checkbook. The court granted the divorce quickly, given the fraud. The judge upheld the trust. Linda got a small settlement and nothing more. I sold a few investments, remodeled the guest room into a study for the grandkids to do homework in when they visited. Lily painted a little sign that said Grandpa's house, and we nailed it to the fence together. Sometimes, when I sit on the porch in the evening, I think about Linda. About the version of life we might have had if she'd come to me honestly. If she'd said, "John, I have a past. I have children. I made mistakes. Help me fix them the right way." I would have helped. That's the part that stings. She didn't give me the chance to be the man she pretended I already was. She just tried to use him like a tool. So yes, on my birthday, my wife brought the family she'd kept hidden for 25 years and tried to turn my life into their bailout plan. And I gave her a gift: the truth, a suitcase, and the door. Now I want to know what you think. Was I cruel to expose everything in front of both our families and send her away on the same day? Or was that exactly the justice someone like Linda deserved?
My grandpa swore this really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.